It started on a Thursday night, a cold one, the kind where the whole town of Redwood Falls felt heavier than usual. And inside this small, quiet house on Red Maple Street, number 1432, the one with the chipped mailbox and the porch light that flickered even when the weather was fine, 7-year-old Harper Lane was learning what real fear felt like. Not the kind of fear kids talk about at school. Monsters under the bed. Shadows in the closet. No. This was the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. The kind that makes your breath shake. It started with a voice. Sharp, angry, too loud for a night that should have been calm. "Where is it?" a man roared from the hallway. Harper froze. She had been coloring at the kitchen table, humming a small tune she'd made up. But the second she heard that voice, the voice she knew too well, everything in her body went still, like someone pressed a pause button on her nerves. Then came the crash. Something hit the wall, hard. The sound rattled the glass of water next to her crayons. "Don't lie to me," the man shouted again. And that was it. The tune in Harper's head vanished. Her heart dropped. Her fingers shook. She slid off her chair, quiet, quick, because she'd learned, after months of this, that being quiet was the only safe thing she could do. She crawled under the table, tucked between two wooden beams where the shadows were darkest, and she waited. The yelling got closer. "No more games," the man hissed. His voice was lower now, meaner, the kind that twisted her stomach. A lamp fell, then something else, maybe a drawer, maybe a kick. The sound scraped through the whole house, then footsteps, slow, heavy, getting closer. Harper covered her mouth with both hands, breath shaking too loud, too fast. The kitchen light flicked on. She didn't breathe. The man's shadow stretched across the tile, long, jagged. "I know you heard me," he muttered. "Come out." She didn't move. Then she saw it. The glint of metal in his hand. A kitchen knife. Her lungs tightened, trying to hide inside her ribs. "I said—" He stopped, and the whole house went silent, like it was holding its breath with her. Then everything happened fast. A woman's voice from the living room. "Stop, please!" A shove, a thud, a choked cry, and then sirens, far at first, then closer, louder, racing down Red Maple Street like the world finally remembered Harper existed. Red and blue lights flashed through the window, painting the kitchen floor in frantic colors. "Police! Step away from her!" The front door burst open. Boots, voices, shouting. The man yelling something back she couldn't understand. A scream, a struggle, a crash. "Get the knife!" Harper curled tighter, hands pressed to her ears, the noise smashing against her skull, louder and louder and louder, until suddenly, nothing. Just silence. A deep, terrifying silence. Then a soft voice by the doorway. "Little one, can you hear me? You're safe. I promise." She didn't move. Couldn't. Two officers stepped in. One knelt, lifting the tablecloth slowly, carefully, gently. And there she was, a tiny girl with shaking knees, hair stuck to her cheeks, hands still covering her mouth. "My name's Officer Hayes," he whispered. "We're gonna get you out, okay?" Harper stared through him. Not at him, through him. Like her mind wasn't in the room anymore. He offered a hand. He didn't touch her. Just offered. She didn't take it. "All right," he murmured. "We'll go slow." A warning glance to his partner. "This is bad. This is really bad." Another officer whispered into a radio. "Victim unresponsive. No verbal reaction. Likely severe shock." They helped her crawl out. Her legs barely worked. She stumbled. He steadied her, gently. She didn't fight. Didn't cry. Didn't make a sound. The paramedic asked her name. Nothing. Her age. Nothing. If she was hurt. Nothing. If she wanted her mom, still nothing. Her eyes didn't blink right, like her soul was someplace far, far away. As they carried her through the doorway, past the lights, the neighbors, the chaos, the cold night air hit her face. But Harper didn't react. Not to the wind, not to the lights, not to anything. She just stared. Blank. Silent. Gone. And on that night, on Red Maple Street, beneath the sirens and the whispering crowd, a part of Harper Lane's childhood ended forever. And another part, the part full of fear that never truly leaves, began. After that night on Red Maple Street, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. Like the whole world had to stop and tiptoe around Harper, because even the smallest sound might break her again. They brought her to Maplewood Trauma Center the next morning. Not the hospital, but the quiet building across from the old fire station. The one with the pale green walls and those oddly calming bird murals lining the hallway. People in town always said Maplewood was the place where broken things get put back together. But Harper, she didn't look like she believed in getting fixed. She didn't talk. She didn't cry. She didn't even hold on to the stuffed bear a nurse tried giving her. She just existed, like a shadow that forgot how to be a kid. The intake nurse kept her voice soft, too soft, like she was afraid Harper might disappear if spoken to normally. Dr. Naomi Reese tried everything you're supposed to do with traumatized children. Gentle questions, soft toys, crayons, those breathing exercises adults swear by. But Harper didn't respond. Not a word. Not a nod. Not even the tiniest flicker of recognition. Even when they guided her into the therapy room, the warmest place in Maplewood, with a couch that looked like it belonged in someone's grandma's living room, she just stood there, arms limp, eyes fixed on the floor, like she was reading a message only she could see. Dr. Reese knelt to eye level. "Harper, sweetheart, you're safe here." Nothing. No blink, no twitch, no flinch. Just that blank, faraway stare. After nearly 2 hours of trying, Dr. Reese exhaled, long, defeated, rubbed her forehead, and said the thing staff only said when they were out of options. "Bring him in." The door opened with a soft click, and that's when K9 Atlas walked in. Not rushed, not loud, not even curious, just steady. A massive German shepherd with a graying muzzle and tired amber eyes. His gait carried a faint stiffness in the back leg, the kind of injury only old working dogs carry. He wore no vest, no badge, just a simple collar with a faded brass tag. Harper didn't look up at first. Why would she? Everything else had been noise. But Atlas, he wasn't noise. He walked in, stopped a few feet from her, and then lowered himself to the floor. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a, look at me, I'm comforting you way. More like, if you need me, I'm here. If you don't, I'm still here. Dr. Reese froze mid-sentence. Even she hadn't expected him to move that fast. Atlas didn't stare, didn't tilt his head. He simply lay there, front paws stretched forward, breathing slow, slow enough that anyone nearby could feel their own heart settle. Harper finally glanced sideways. Just a flick. Half a second. But it was enough. Her breath hitched, a tiny stutter in her chest, like something inside her recognized him before her mind could. She stepped forward. Dr. Reese didn't dare breathe. Harper took another step, and another. Not fast, not confident. Just small, careful movements, like she was approaching something sacred. Atlas didn't move, didn't lift his head, didn't wag. He simply waited. Harper crouched beside him, knees trembling, scared she might break the moment if she moved too quickly. Her hand hovered above his fur, fingers trembling like she wasn't sure the world would let her touch something gentle again. Dr. Reese whispered, "Oh my God." Harper's hand lowered the final inch. She touched him. Atlas exhaled, long, steady, grounding. A warm breath brushed her wrist, traveling up her arm like a shockwave. Harper's shoulders loosened, her jaw unclenched. Her eyes fluttered, like she hadn't blinked in hours, and she didn't look away. She pressed her palm to his neck, right where the fur was thickest, and stayed there. Fingers curling just a little, like she needed to make sure he was real. For the first time since the night everything shattered, Harper looked alive, not healed, not okay, but present. Atlas lifted his head just an inch, slow, gentle, and nudged her hand. Not a lick, not a push, just a quiet acknowledgement. "I see you." Harper's breath broke, but not like she was drowning, more like she was resurfacing. A single tear slid down her cheek. Just one. But for a child who hadn't reacted to sirens, to paramedics, to adults calling her name, that one tear was a miracle. She whispered, not a word, not a name, just a tiny sound, a breath with shape. Dr. Reese gasped. She... Cole, she just vocalized. Lieutenant Cole Jennings stood in the doorway, Atlas's former handler, not daring to step inside, afraid his presence might break the moment. He whispered back, "Told you. He knows what to do." Harper pressed closer to Atlas, fingers buried in his fur, like he was the only anchor she had left. And honestly, he was. In that small therapy room, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of lavender candles, Harper Lane took her first step back from the edge. And Atlas, the dog who once lost his purpose, found a new one, all without a single word. If Atlas was the first thing that made Harper move, then what happened in the weeks after was, well, it was like watching a kid drift between worlds without choosing either of them. 6 whole weeks passed at Maplewood Trauma Center. 6 long, strange, quiet weeks. And when I say quiet, I don't just mean she didn't talk. I mean silence wrapped around her like an extra layer of skin. Every morning, Dr. Naomi Reese would kneel down, smile softly, and say, "Good morning, Harper. Can you look at me today?" And every morning, Harper wouldn't. She'd blink sometimes. She'd breathe. But she wouldn't respond. Not with her head. Not with her hands. Not with her voice. It was like her body lived here. But her mind, yeah, her mind was someplace far away. Someplace dark where sound didn't exist. "Harper, sweetheart, do you want water?" Nothing. "Are you feeling cold?" Silence. "Does your tummy hurt?" Still nothing. Naomi tried everything. Stickers, soft toys, finger paints, those little fidget things kids always love. But Harper just stared past her, like Naomi was made of glass. And honestly, it broke Naomi's heart. You could see it in her eyes. That tired sigh adults make when they're losing hope but pretending they're not. The only place Harper reacted to anything at all, was during her sessions with Atlas. Those were different. She didn't talk. She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. But she existed in a way she didn't anywhere else. Every day around 2 o'clock, Cole would bring Atlas down the hall, his nails tapping softly on the floor. Click, click, click. And even though Harper never looked directly, something in her body always shifted, like she felt him before she saw him. Cole would open the door, whisper, "Go on, bud," and Atlas would pad inside, slow, steady. He never rushed her, never nudged her first. He'd just find a spot, usually by the soft rug near the window, and settle down like a quiet, breathing mountain. And Harper, she would wander over, not fast, not slow, just drifting, like a little ghost still deciding if she belonged here. Sometimes she'd sit beside him. Sometimes she'd curl into his side. Sometimes she'd press her cheek against his ribs and listen to him breathe. And that was the only sound she reacted to. Atlas's breathing. That slow, deep, steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat she could borrow when hers felt too shaky. One afternoon, after a stormy night when thunder kept everyone awake, Naomi entered the therapy room expecting the usual. Harper curled beside Atlas, both half asleep in their quiet bubble. But what she found made her stop in the doorway. Harper wasn't just lying next to Atlas. She was holding him, actually holding him. Her small hands tangled deep in his fur, gripping tight like she thought he might disappear. Her face buried against his neck, her shoulders shaking, not dramatically, just those quiet, trembling shakes kids make when they're finally letting something out. And Atlas, God, the way he reacted. He didn't look surprised, didn't shift, didn't even lift his head. He just breathed, heavier, slower, like he was matching his whole body to hers. Naomi covered her mouth. She didn't dare move. Harper wasn't crying with sound. No sobs, no gasps, not one noise. But tears were sliding down her cheeks, soaking into Atlas's fur. Naomi whispered to Cole in the hallway, "She's releasing something. She just doesn't know how to use her voice for it." And Cole whispered back, "Yeah, I've seen soldiers like that. Kids, too." The body remembers trauma long after the voice forgets how to speak. Harper didn't move for 40 minutes. Atlas didn't move for 41. And over the next few weeks, the pattern stayed the same. Dr. Reese called Harper's name. No response. Nurses asked questions. Nothing. Social workers tried flashcards. Silence. Adults tried to make her feel safe. She didn't budge. But the second Atlas entered the room, she softened. She uncurled. Her breathing slowed. Her hands relaxed. Sometimes she'd fall asleep against him, fingers knotted in his fur like an anchor. Naomi would whisper, "Let them be," and leave the room dim and warm until Harper woke up. It wasn't progress anyone could measure, but it was the only progress that felt real. And Naomi knew, deep in her gut, Harper wasn't mute because she couldn't speak. She was mute because speaking meant going back to the moment her world shattered. And she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But she stayed with Atlas. She touched Atlas. She breathed with Atlas. And in the world of trauma therapy, that kind of trust is a miracle. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, Naomi would sit in the observation room, watching Harper's tiny fingers curl into Atlas's fur, watching their chests rise and fall together. And you could see it on Naomi's face. She believed this dog was doing something no person could. Helping Harper remember the world wasn't only dark. Helping her remember silence didn't have to mean fear. Helping her remember she was still here, as if Harper's voice wasn't lost, just waiting for the right moment, the right reason, the right heart, to guide it back out. And it makes you wonder, have you ever seen someone who couldn't speak, but somehow said everything anyway? Yes, no, kinda. Hard to explain, but yeah, hard to. If Harper's silence wrapped around her like armor, then what happened next was the first little crack in that shell. And surprisingly, it didn't come from her. It came from Atlas. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the whole sky looked washed out, like somebody took the sun and turned the dimmer way down. Harper was sitting on the rug in the therapy room, tracing tiny circles into Atlas's fur with her fingertip. She wasn't really there, not mentally, but she stayed beside him, because staying beside him was the one thing her body did automatically now. Cole Jennings walked in holding a cup of stale precinct coffee, the kind no one actually enjoys. He leaned against the wall, rubbing his thumb over his wedding band, a habit he had whenever he was thinking too hard. Naomi Reese looked up. "Cole, you okay?" He let out a breath that sounded older than he was. "Yeah. Well, no, I don't know." He nodded toward Harper and Atlas. "She deserves to know who's helping her. Don't you think?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "She can't exactly have a conversation." "I'm not talking about her talking," he said softly. "I'm talking about her understanding." There was a pause, a long one. Then Naomi gave the smallest nod. "All right. Just keep your voice gentle." Cole lowered himself to the floor a few feet away from Harper and Atlas. Not too close. He didn't want to spook her. He set down the coffee, interlaced his fingers, and stared at the rug for a second, like he wasn't sure if he should begin. Then he exhaled. "Harper, can I, tell you something about Atlas?" Harper didn't turn her head, but her finger stopped moving. That was her version of yes. Cole glanced at Atlas, who seemed to understand exactly where this was going. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't move. He stayed still, painfully still, like he was bracing for something. "Atlas hasn't always been here," Cole began. He used to work with me. We were partners, real partners. Same squad car, same routes, same calls." He chuckled under his breath, the kind of tired laugh that really means, "I miss those days more than I can say out loud." He was the best damn dog in the unit. Everyone knew it. Atlas blinked slowly, almost ashamed. Cole's smile faded. But things changed. There was this call down at Denver Pier, middle of the night. Fog so thick you couldn't see your own boots. We thought it was a routine bust. He swallowed hard, and Naomi took one careful step back, giving him space. It wasn't routine. It was a trap. Harper's head moved just slightly. Not a full turn, but something shifted. Cole stared at his hands. There was an explosion. A propane tank rigged behind some crates. We didn't see it until it was too late. His voice cracked. Not much. Just enough to show the wound was old, but still raw. I lost my partner that night, Detective Marlowe. He was one of the good ones. Atlas shifted, just barely, like the memory itself weighed on him. And Atlas? He tried to drag Marlowe out of the fire. Cole's jaw tightened. Damn near killed himself doing it. Harper's hand froze in Atlas's fur. Cole pointed to the dog's back leg. See that limp? It's permanent. Shattered bone. Too much scar tissue. They said he couldn't work anymore. He scoffed, angry at the memory. Not useful, they called him. Can you imagine? After everything he did? Atlas didn't look at Cole. He didn't look at Harper either. He stared at the floor like he didn't want anyone to see the shame behind his eyes. Cole shook his head, slowly. He wouldn't eat for days after that. Wouldn't play. Didn't bark. Not once. Sometimes I wondered if he lost his voice, just like... He stopped himself. Harper finally lifted her gaze, barely, cautiously, and looked at Cole. Just for a second. Then she looked down at Atlas. Her small fingers curled tighter into his fur, not in fear, not in panic, but with something softer, understanding. Cole noticed. His breath softened. That's why he's good with you, kiddo. He knows what it's like, losing something big, something that mattered. Atlas, sensing the shift, lowered his head onto Harper's lap, not in the slow, deliberate way he usually did. This time, it looked heavy, like he was letting her hold the part of him he'd been hiding. Harper didn't pull away. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against Atlas's neck. A tiny gesture, almost nothing. But for Harper, it was the emotional equivalent of shouting from a rooftop. Naomi blinked rapidly to keep herself from tearing up. Cole looked away, pretending something on the wall was suddenly very interesting. The girl who couldn't speak, and the dog who'd been told he wasn't useful anymore, were holding each other together. Two broken pieces quietly fitting into place. Naomi whispered, "She understands him." Cole nodded. "Yeah. Maybe better than any of us ever could." Harper's hand didn't leave Atlas for the rest of the session. And Atlas didn't stop leaning into her touch. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of moment you tell in stories with big fireworks and music swelling. It was small, soft, and real. The kind of moment that changes everything without making a sound. If hearing Atlas's story cracked something open inside Harper, then what happened that night? Yeah, that was the moment everything finally shifted. The moment her silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was a wall about to break. It happened on a stormy night. One of those nights where the wind sounds like it's trying to peel shingles off the roof, and the trees outside Maplewood scratch at the windows like they're begging to come in. The whole trauma center felt heavier, like even the air knew something was building. Harper had been sleeping. Well, sleeping in the way kids with nightmares sleep. Tossing, curling into herself, clutching the blanket like it might keep the darkness out if she just held it tight enough. Naomi checked on her around 9. Cole checked at 10. At 11, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then, maybe around 1:30 in the morning, it started. Harper's breathing sped up. Her fingers twitched. Her knees pulled toward her chest like she was folding herself into the smallest shape possible. And then she whispered something. Not a word. Just a sharp little gasp that sounded like fear caught on a hook. Her dream shifted. She was back on Red Maple Street. Back in that hallway. Back in the moment where everything went wrong. In the dream, Elliot Calder's hand clamped around her arm again. The grip too tight, nails digging into her skin. His voice hissed in her ear, that awful whisper she could never forget. You stay quiet. You hear me? Her breathing turned ragged, fast, uneven, panicked. Then she whimpered. A tiny sound. Barely anything. But for Harper, it was a scream. She jerked awake. Her eyes flew open so fast it looked painful. She sat up straight, chest heaving, fingers clawing at the sheets like they were holding her down. She wasn't in the dream anymore, but she wasn't fully out of it either. Her breaths came in quick, broken bursts, like someone pressing hard on her lungs. She opened her mouth, maybe to cry, maybe to scream, but no sound came out. Just more silence, the kind that feels like suffocating from the inside. Her heart raced, her throat closed, her vision blurred. Panic attack. The bad kind. She reached out for something. Anything. Her hand shaking in the dark. And then, a thud outside her door. Quick, heavy. Another. Then the soft woof of a dog pushing the door open. Atlas. He stormed into the room like he'd been waiting for her panic to call him. Not barking, not whining, just moving. With purpose. He went straight to her bed. Paws hitting the tile in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Then he was there, right beside her, chest rising and falling like an anchor dropped exactly where it was needed. Harper's hand hovered in the air, trembling. Atlas leaned in, pressing his head beneath her palm, guiding her hand into his fur. Her fingers locked instantly, like grabbing a lifeline. Her breath stuttered, her vision steadied. Barely. Her body leaned forward, collapsing into him. Atlas shifted his weight, bracing himself like he'd done this 1,000 times before. He let her bury her face into the side of his neck. He didn't move, didn't flinch. His breathing slowed on purpose. Deep inhale. Long exhale, like he was saying, match me. Just breathe with me. Harper tried, failed, tried again. Atlas pressed closer. Her breath caught in her throat. A tiny choke like something inside her was trying to climb its way out. And then it happened. So soft. So broken, so tiny you might think the room imagined it. Atlas. The name came out like a cracked whisper, shaky, thin, barely there. But it was there. Her voice, her actual voice, not a sound, not a sob, a word. Atlas froze. Then he exhaled, slow and relieved. Harper gripped him tighter, fingers buried so deep in his fur she looked like she might fall through him if she let go. "Atlas," she said it again, not louder, but clearer, like her lungs remembered how to form the letters even if her courage was still catching up. Outside the doorway, Cole rushed over after hearing the commotion. He stopped instantly. He didn't dare enter. He just watched, hand gripping the doorframe, eyes wide. Naomi appeared behind him, breath caught mid-inhale. "She spoke," Cole whispered. "She said his name." Naomi covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Harper kept whispering it, slowly, haltingly, like she was checking each time if the world would break when she spoke. "Atlas." And with every repetition, she curled closer into him, the terror melting out of her body inch by inch. Her shaking eased, her breathing steadied, her shoulders loosened. Her nightmare faded. The darkness didn't win this time. Atlas stayed beside her until she fell asleep again, her cheek pressed into his fur, one hand resting above his heart. And that night, in the dim light of Maplewood Trauma Center, something small, but enormous, happened. Harper Lane stopped drowning. Atlas pulled her back, not with barking, not with commands, not with therapy, with presence, with patience, with love. The quiet kind nobody names out loud. If Harper whispering Atlas's name was the moment everything cracked open, then what happened a week later? Yeah, that was the moment the world tried to slam that crack shut again. It was the day of the first preliminary hearing. Maplewood had been buzzing since sunrise, staff rushing around, phones ringing non-stop, officers pacing the halls like they were waiting for something bad to happen. And maybe they were. Trauma centers have this strange way of sensing storms before they hit. Harper was sitting on a bench near the entrance, knees tucked under her, both hands fisted in Atlas's fur. She didn't speak again after that night. But she didn't have to. The way she held on to him said everything. The way Atlas walked beside her. Slow, careful, protective, said the rest. Cole knelt down in front of them. "Harper, we're just going to be in the courtroom. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. Just stay close to Atlas, okay?" She blinked once. Her version of, "I hear you." They entered Redwood County Courthouse through the side door. Officers guided them around reporters, through metal detectors, past lawyers clutching cups of burnt coffee. The air tasted like nerves and cheap cologne. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright for a room holding so much darkness. Atlas walked in first. Harper followed, fingers tangled in his fur. And then Victor Calder appeared. The man looked like someone who ironed his soul along with his suits. Slick hair, sharp jaw, a smile that didn't reach anything above his teeth. He stood beside Elliot Crane, whispering something that made the older man pale. Cole stiffened. Naomi felt her stomach drop. Even Atlas's ears twitched, the way they do when he senses a threat, not a sound. The bailiff called the room to order. Everyone sat. Harper stayed on the witness bench. Atlas pressed against her leg, still, alert, unblinking, in work mode. And then came the moment. Calder claimed he needed to greet the child. Lying through his teeth, of course. He walked toward her, too slowly, too casually, like a predator who wanted its prey to know it was coming. Cole stood immediately. Step back. But the judge wasn't in the room yet. Technically, Calder wasn't violating anything. He smirked. I'm simply approaching my potential witness. And when he reached Harper, he bent down, fake concern plastered across his face, and whispered something no one else could hear well. Almost no one. Atlas heard everything. Calder leaned in, lips barely moving, voice cold enough to freeze bone. If she speaks, I'll make sure they put you down, Mutt. It was the kind of whisper that slithered, the kind meant to shatter, the kind that should have triggered teeth, growls, chaos. Harper froze, her whole body locked up. Her breath hitched so sharply, her chest collapsed inward. Cole didn't hear the words, but he saw the reaction. Back away. Louder now. Naomi stepped forward, a hand on Harper's shoulder, guiding her back. Calder straightened, fixing his tie like he hadn't just threatened a service dog with death. He smiled, smug, oily. And Atlas? Atlas didn't snap. Atlas didn't growl. Atlas didn't even stand. He just lifted his head and looked at Calder. And that look, it wasn't angry. It wasn't scared. It wasn't confused. It was steady, heavy, old. The kind of look a soldier gives a man who's already lost the war and doesn't know it yet. Atlas's eyes locked on Calder's with this low, simmering intensity. The kind that comes from surviving explosions, losing partners, staring straight into darkness. Calder faltered. Not for long. Half a second. But it was there. Twitch. A skip in his breath. A crack in his smirk. Because Atlas wasn't just a dog. He was a survivor. And survivors recognize monsters. Not with fear, but with certainty. Harper trembled beside him, gripping his collar until her knuckles went white. Atlas leaned into her. Not pushing, not shifting, just enough for her to feel his weight. I'm here. That's what it meant. What it always meant. Calder walked back to his table, pretending he hadn't exposed the rot inside him. Pretending no one saw the way he flinched under Atlas's stare. But Cole saw. Naomi saw. Hell. Half the courtroom felt the air change, because something had shifted. Calder thought he broke a child, thought he intimidated a dog. But what he really did, he woke the part of Atlas that used to run into fire. He woke the protector, the fighter, the warrior who had already chosen Harper long before she whispered his name. Atlas lowered his head again, eyes still locked on Calder until the very last second. Calm, unmoving, unshaken. And that's what scared Calder the most. Not the teeth, Not the size, not the training, the calm. Because only something that's been through hell and come back can stay still in the presence of evil. And Atlas, yeah, he'd already survived hell once. If Calder's whisper was the first punch, then what he did next, yeah, that was the part where he dug his fingers in and twisted. Because men like him, they don't attack you once. They build a whole world designed to make everyone doubt you, and then smile while it collapses on top of you. The courtroom had barely settled before Calder started spinning his version of reality. And honestly, it was impressive, in the worst way. Like watching someone handcraft a nightmare. He stood up, smoothed his suit jacket, and said in this calm, charming voice, the kind that makes regular people think he's trustworthy. Your Honor, before we begin, I'd like to address the inconsistencies brought up in earlier reports. Inconsistencies. That's what he called it. The first inconsistency he presented was a witness, a neighbor, a sweet-looking older woman, silver hair in a bun, cardigan, purse clutched in both hands, playing the role to perfection. Calder smiled at her like she was his favorite aunt. Mrs. Rowley, could you please tell the court what you heard that night? She cleared her throat, eyes darting toward Elliot Crane. I heard nothing unusual, no yelling, no struggle. Elliot's always been such a good father figure, so gentle. Naomi's eyebrows shot up. Cole muttered under his breath, that's a lie. Atlas's ears twitched. Harper's fingers tightened in his collar. Calder moved on, like he hadn't just injected poison into the jury's minds. Next came a coworker. Nervous smile. Rehearsed lines. Trembling hands. Guilt. Not fear. He talked about Harper all the time, the man said. Said she was sensitive. Said she had imagination problems. Calder nodded sympathetically. Imagination problems. Letting the words linger like they were truth, and then the security footage. A clip from Elliot's porch camera. Not the whole clip. Shortened, trimmed, cut right before the yelling, before the crash, before the moment Harper fled under the table. All the chaos gone. What remained? A quiet hallway. A normal night. A man walking with a mug of tea. Calder hit play again. Paused dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, does this look like the home of a violent man? Naomi whispered. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Cole clenched his jaw until his teeth creaked. And the worst part? The jury looked unsure. Calder wasn't done. He pulled out a stack of papers, thick, crisp, highlighted. Here we have the original police notes. He pointed. See here? Child appeared calm, no physical injuries. Calm, no injuries. The jury shifted, enough to shake them. Naomi whispered, she wasn't calm. She was in shock. Cole nodded. They don't understand trauma. He knew they wouldn't. And then, so the moment even Atlas reacted to. Elliot Crane took the stand. He walked slowly, shoulders hunched, tissue in hand. No tears, just pretending. Your Honor, I've tried my best. Harper's fragile. She imagines things. I would never hurt her. Never. The jury melted. Not all, but enough. Harper stared at him, not blinking, looking smaller than her clothes, the world shrinking around her again. Atlas leaned into her leg, grounding her, chest rising and falling steady. She matched him, barely, but enough. Calder stepped forward like a showman. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a tragedy. A child overwhelmed by fear, unable to separate dreams from reality. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, furious. Cole half stood, whispering, "You son of a..." But Atlas was the only one who truly reacted. Not with teeth, not with sound, just a slow, deliberate lift of his head. And he stared at Calder again. That same steady, unblinking stare. Not aggressive, worse, knowing. Calder felt it. His eyes twitched. His breath skipped. But he kept going, twisting the knife deeper. He placed a hand on Elliot's shoulder, fake compassion dripping like oil. Isn't it possible that Harper's trauma created a false memory? The jury murmured. The room tilted. Harper's eyes filled, not with tears, but with betrayal. The adults weren't listening. The truth wasn't winning. The world was turning upside down again. And the worst part? She couldn't speak. Not yet. Atlas nudged her hand. She gripped his fur, and something passed between them. Quiet, steady, certain. Hold on. The truth is coming. Because lies can build a world, but they can't hold it forever. And let me ask you, watching a kid get blamed for the truth she survived, does that hit you in the gut too? Yes, a little. More than I expected. Hard to explain, but yes. If Calder's web of lies was starting to tighten, then what happened next was the moment the whole thing, just for a split second, lost its grip. And it didn't come from evidence or objections or some dramatic courtroom twist. No. It came from something so small, so impossibly gentle. The entire room didn't know how to process it at first. It started with silence. Not the heavy, suffocating kind Harper lived in, but the strange, fragile kind, where a courtroom holds its breath and pretends it isn't. Calder paced in front of the jury like he owned the floor. His voice smooth, confident, dripping sympathy he didn't feel. Trauma, he said, hands spreading theatrically, can distort memory in the most tragic ways. Children, especially sensitive ones, may confuse dreams with reality. He looked at Harper. Not a glance. A weapon. A stare meant to shrink her. Harper didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. She was folded into herself, hand gripping Atlas's collar like it was the only solid thing left. Calder continued. My client is not a monster, he murmured, lowering his voice to that fake soft tone he used for manipulation. And then Atlas moved. Barely. just a flick of his tail. But when your world has been ripped apart, even the smallest sound, a breath, a shift of weight, a whisper of movement, can crack through the walls you've built around your heart. Atlas's tail brushed Harper's knee. Not an accident, not random. A tiny, gentle tap. Hey, I'm here. Look at me. Not him, Harper blinked. A real blink. Alive. Present. Calder didn't notice. Too busy performing. The jury didn't notice. Hypnotized by him. But Cole noticed. Naomi noticed. And Atlas. Atlas knew exactly what he was doing. He wagged his tail again. Softer. Slower. A gentle thump. Thump. Against the wood. Harper's shoulders lifted. Not in fear. In surprise. Her lips parted. Like a tiny pocket of air finally broke free inside her chest. Her eyes trembled at the corners. Atlas nudged her knee. Just a little. Just enough to say, "Stay with me. Don't drift away." And then, a sound. So small. So fragile. So unexpected that even the air paused. A laugh. A tiny, trembling, breathy laugh. Barely a second long. More a gasp of joy than a real laugh. But it was real. It was hers. And it echoed. Across the wood. Across the walls. Across a courtroom built on lies. Every head snapped toward her. Naomi's eyes filled instantly. Cole choked on his breath. Even the bailiff's jaw dropped. Harper Lane, mute for weeks, broken by fear, had laughed. Atlas looked up at her like, "Yeah, that's it. That's my girl." Harper covered her mouth, eyes wide, shocked by the sound that escaped her. But the best part wasn't her reaction. It was Calder's. He froze, mid-sentence, mid-word. His mouth hung open, just long enough for the mask to slip. His eyes darted. To Harper, to Atlas, to the jury. Rattled, shaken. He tried to recover, cleared his throat, adjusted his jacket, smoothed his hair. But it didn't matter. The spell he cast over the room, the pity, the manipulation, the slick performance, had cracked. Because that laugh, that tiny, beautiful sound, it told the room something his lies couldn't bury. Harper wasn't broken. She wasn't confused. She wasn't imagining things. She was still in there, still fighting, still alive. And Atlas was the one who brought her back. Calder tried to keep talking, but his rhythm was off. His pacing stuttered. His voice tightened. The jury looked less certain. Some even smiled, soft, sympathetic, toward Harper. It was the kind of shift you can't measure, but you can feel. A breeze in a stuffy room. A light flickering on at the end of a tunnel. Harper didn't laugh again. She just leaned closer to Atlas, forehead brushing his ear, breathing steadying like his presence was rewiring her from the inside out. The courtroom saw it, felt it. That connection between them wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just instinct. It wasn't something you could explain with therapy or psychology. It was spiritual. A bond only trauma survivors understand. A bond where one soul breathes so the other remembers how. Calder tried to continue, but the room wasn't his anymore. It was Harper's and Atlas's. And the truth, quiet, patient, waiting, just took its first step toward the light. If Harper's tiny laugh cracked Calder's perfect performance, then what happened next? Yeah, that was the moment the whole damn thing collapsed. And it didn't fall slowly. It dropped like a trap door swinging open beneath his feet. It started with something small, not dramatic, not obvious. Just a flicker. Cole saw it first. He'd been watching Atlas the whole time. Hands clasped tight, jaw grinding like he was chewing down every violent thought in his head. Not looking at Calder, not looking at the jury. Just the dog. And that's when he saw it. A tiny red blink beneath Atlas's collar. One single pulse of light. Then another. Cole's eyes widened. Breath caught. Hell. Naomi leaned in. What? What is it? But he didn't answer. Not with words. He reached into his pocket, slow, steady, careful, like even the air might ruin what he was holding. A small black remote, barely bigger than a car key. His thumb hovered over the button. He looked at Harper, trembling, folded into Atlas. He looked at the jury, shaken, unsettled. He looked at Calder, mid-sentence, confident, oblivious. And then he pressed the button. A faint crackle filled the courtroom, soft at first, like static bleeding through a speaker. Calder froze mid-word. Confusion. Wait. What is... The judge frowned. Is someone's phone? And then the static cleared. A voice slithered out. Low, venomous, unmistakable. Calder's voice. If she speaks, I'll make sure they put you down, mutt. The room detonated in silence. The jury jerked back. Naomi slapped a hand over her mouth. Harper's eyes flew wide. Atlas didn't move, just lifted his head like he'd been waiting for this moment to arrive. Calder's face drained to chalk. But the recording wasn't done. There was a rustle of clothing. Then another whisper, colder than the first. Make sure the neighbor sticks to the script. She slips. This whole thing falls apart. A ripple of horror swept the gallery. The judge's jaw tightened. The bailiff stepped forward. But the bomb kept ticking. And the report. Delete the second page. The one with the broken glass timeline. If they see that, we're screwed. Someone gasped loud enough to echo, And then came the line that snapped the room in half. Calder's voice, sickeningly proud. "Relax, Elliot. I paid the clerk. She'll misplace whatever we need. This case is ours." And then, silence. Not peace, not calm. A stunned, horrified silence that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Calder staggered. This is out of context. Someone doctored. This is—" "Sit down." The judge snapped, thunder in her voice. The device wasn't done. One last line leaked out. Casual, cruel, certain. "No one believes traumatized kids. Their memories are garbage. One sprinkle of doubt, and we win." Harper flinched. Atlas leaned into her. Solid, grounded, unbreakable. Click. The recording ended. But the damage had already sunk into every heart in the room. The jurors' faces hardened, shifting from confusion to horror, to rage. Real, righteous, protective rage. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Calder, do you deny the authenticity of that recording?" Calder sputtered. "The dog. This is illegal, tampered, fabricated." Cole stepped forward, voice steady as stone. "Your Honor, that device was issued by the department. No tampering, no modification. It activates automatically when someone speaks within the dog's proximity. What you heard is exactly what he said." The courtroom buzzed. A hive struck with a stick. The judge turned to the jury. "Disregard the defense's narrative. What you just heard constitutes witness tampering, intimidation, evidence destruction, and bribery. This hearing is postponed. Bailiff, take him." Calder thrashed. "Let go, you idiots! That mutt, that dog!" Atlas stood, not threatening, not lunging, just standing. Tall, silent, steady. And just like that, Calder shut up. Because for the first time he finally understood. Atlas wasn't just a dog. He was the witness who never forgot, the survivor who never backed down, the soldier who came back from hell carrying truth like a burning torch. Harper reached out, both hands on Atlas's shoulder, holding him like he was gravity itself. Her lips parted, just barely, and she whispered, soft, trembling, real, "Thank you." No one breathed. No one moved. No one dared break the moment. A child told her voice didn't matter, had just used it. And she'd used it for him. As the bailiffs dragged Calder out, Cole glanced at the blinking light under Atlas's collar and whispered, "Hell of a job, partner." If the recording was the moment the room stopped breathing, then what happened right after? Yeah, that was the moment it exhaled. Loud, shaky, full of everything people had been holding inside. When the last click of the audio faded, the courtroom didn't move. Not for a second. Not for a breath. It was like the whole place turned into a photograph, frozen in shock. And then, reality snapped back. The bailiff's boots hit the floor first. Thud. 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 As he stepped toward Victor Calder. The man who'd spent weeks weaving lies, twisting truth, and performing for the world, suddenly looked smaller than he ever had. "Stand up." Calder didn't. Maybe he couldn't. His legs looked like water. "I said stand up." The bailiff yanked him to his feet. Metal cuffs snapping closed around his wrists. The click echoed louder than the gavel, louder than the gasps, louder than Calder's pathetic stammering. "You can't. You don't understand. I. But no one cared what he had to say anymore, because the truth had spoken, and it sure as hell didn't come from him. As Calder was dragged past the table, Elliot Crane collapsed into his chair like someone pulled a plug in his spine. His face drained of color. He looked exposed, raw, like every mask he'd ever worn had just melted off. "Victor, you said..." But Victor wasn't listening. He was too busy stumbling as the bailiff shoved him forward. Across the bench, Judge Monroe took off her glasses, hands trembling. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose, wiped the corner of her eyes. Judges aren't supposed to do that. But she did. Because sometimes the truth isn't just legal, it's human. The jury? Half of them were crying, the other half frozen, horror carved into their faces. One older man pressed a hand to his chest, like the truth had hit him right in the heart. Naomi whispered, "My God, Harper." Cole stood with a hand over his heart, steadying it. And Harper? For a moment, she didn't move. She stood at the witness bench, Atlas's fur still clutched in her fingers, eyes darting from Calder being dragged away, to the crying jurors, to the trembling judge, to Cole's stunned expression. And then something in her released. Not fear, not panic, not silence. Release. Her whole body shook, this invisible weight lifting from her chest, and before anyone could react, Harper moved. She didn't walk. She didn't step. She ran. Across the courtroom, feet pounding, breaths breaking, hair flying behind her like she was chasing freedom itself, she crashed into Atlas, not gentle, not careful, but with the full force of a child who'd finally stopped being afraid. Her arms wrapped tight around his neck, squeezing like she was afraid the moment might disappear if she let go. And she cried. Real, loud, shaking cries, the kind her body had been trying to let out for weeks. Tears soaked into his fur. Her fingers dug deep. Her breaths shuddered like something heavy was finally leaving her. Through broken sobs, she whispered, then said again, then finally said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. "We did it. Atlas, we did it." Her voice cracked on the we, trembled on the did, broke completely on the it. And that broke everyone else. Atlas leaned into her, steady, grounding, letting her release everything she'd held inside. The courtroom watched, and then one juror stood, then another, then the entire jury, then the gallery, and suddenly the whole room stood. They stood for her, for the kid who survived, for the voice that came back, for the dog who carried truth when she couldn't. And then, clapping. Soft at first, then louder, then louder. Not performance applause, not polite applause, thank God applause. The kind that shakes inside your chest. Judge Monroe didn't stop it. She let it happen. Maybe because she needed it too. Harper pulled back, looked into Atlas's eyes, those calm, steady eyes that had become her anchor. Her voice wobbled. Thank you. Atlas blinked slowly, like he was saying, no need. I'm right here. Cole rubbed his face, both hands whispering, Jesus. Naomi wiped tears with the back of her sleeve. Even the bailiff paused, Calder dangling in cuffs, watching with softened eyes. Harper hugged Atlas again, tighter, like now that she had her voice back, she'd never let go of the one soul who never asked for it. And for the first time, the room didn't feel like a courtroom. It felt like a victory, a real one, a human one. A small girl and a broken dog standing together in a moment no one would ever forget. If that moment in the courtroom was the victory everyone needed, then what came after? Yeah, that was the part no one was ready for. Because winning doesn't erase everything. It just lets you breathe long enough to face what comes next. And for Atlas, next meant something Harper had never even thought about until Cole sat her down and explained it gently. He said the word retirement. Harper didn't say much, didn't say anything. But her face, yeah. Her face said enough. A week later, after the dust settled and the headlines faded, Cole drove Harper up a winding mountain road toward Silver Ridge K9 Sanctuary. The place sat on the edge of a valley, tucked between tall pines and open fields stretching out like a quilt. It didn't look like a facility. It looked like a postcard someone forgot to send. Atlas sat in the back seat, nose pressed to the window, breathing in the cold Colorado air. Harper sat beside him, one hand resting on his back like she was trying to memorize the shape of him. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The sanctuary gates opened with an old groan, revealing acres of fenced pastures, wooden barns, and retired K9s wandering the fields like soldiers finally allowed to take their armor off. Harper leaned forward, whispering, "Wow." Cole smiled softly. "Yeah, it's peaceful. Dogs who served, they get to live the rest of their lives here. No stress, no gunfire, no alarms." Harper didn't look away from Atlas. He didn't look away from her either. When they parked near the lodge, Cole turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment. "Harper, you did something incredible. You and Atlas. You saved each other." She waited, quiet, listening. But Atlas gave a lot, more than you know. His leg hurts more than he lets on. His nerves, his body. He's tired, kiddo. Really tired. Harper finally noticed the subtle shift of his weight, the slower breaths, the way he eased himself down like he carried pain quietly. Something twisted in her chest. Cole rested a hand on her shoulder. Heroes deserve rest, too. Harper blinked hard. Once. Twice. Holding back tears. Cole opened the door. Come on. He's ready. Atlas hopped out, tail wagging, like he knew exactly where he was and didn't mind it. Harper followed, feet crunching on gravel, fingers brushing once more through his fur as if asking, "You're really okay with this?" Atlas nudged her hand. Yeah, he was okay. Inside the lodge, soft music floated through the air. Warm, calm, safe. A caretaker approached with a clipboard, smiling. "You must be Harper. Atlas is lucky to have you here." Harper didn't answer aloud, but she reached for Atlas's collar. The recorder device was still there. The tiny block of metal that had changed everything. Scratched, dented, worn from weeks pressed against his fur. Harper unhooked it. Slowly, carefully, reverently. Her fingers trembled. Her breath shook. Then she reached into her pocket. A new tag. Silver. Smooth. Engraved in simple letters. Family. Her throat tightened. Eyes burned. But she clipped it onto his collar. Click. A small sound that echoed like a promise. Atlas sniffed it, then looked at her with a slow, warm blink. Approval. Recognition. Love. Harper cupped his face, pressed her forehead to his, and whispered, "You're my family." Atlas licked her hand once. Slow, deliberate. The kind of kiss that says more than words. That's when Harper broke. Tears spilled, hot, unstoppable, dripping into his fur. She clung to him like she was afraid letting go meant losing him forever. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "I don't want to leave you." Atlas leaned into her, steady, patient, warm, telling her without words that letting go wasn't losing. It was loving. Cole knelt beside them, voice soft as air. "Kiddo, he's not leaving you. He's just resting. You can visit any time." Harper clung tighter. Atlas rested his chin on her shoulder. A perfect goodbye. A painful one. A necessary one. After what felt like forever, Harper loosened her grip, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Atlas nudged her. Firm, gentle, like he was saying, "Go on. You're strong enough now." She smiled through tears, and for the first time since the nightmare on Red Maple Street, she walked forward without needing him beside her to stay upright. Atlas watched her go, tail swaying softly, the new tag catching sunlight like a tiny silver heartbeat. Family. Not by blood, not by law, by choice. And choices like that? Yeah, they last forever. If leaving Atlas at Silver Ridge was the hardest thing Harper had ever done as a kid, then coming back 10 years later, yeah, that was the moment she realized just how much one dog had shaped her entire life. The Colorado air felt different now, softer, warmer, like the world had gone a little easier on her since the last time she walked these hills. She was 17, taller, stronger, shoulders relaxed in a way they never were when she was 7. Her hair blew behind her as she stepped through the open gate at Silver Ridge K9. Sanctuary. Boots crunching through gravel that felt weirdly familiar underfoot. She wasn't the scared little girl clutching a dog's fur anymore. She was someone new, someone becoming. But as she walked past the fields, past the barn, past the retired K9s lounging in sunlight, something inside her tightened. The kind of tightness that comes from remembering where your healing began. Harper Lane had spent the last 3 summers volunteering at trauma camps for kids, reading to them, drawing with them, teaching them grounding breaths. And every time a child froze or whispered, "I'm scared," she heard her own voice from a decade ago. Or rather, the voice she didn't have. And every time she helped a child breathe, she whispered in her mind, "Atlas taught me this." She followed a dirt path lined with daisies, lavender, wild asters swaying in the breeze, and stopped when she reached the quiet hill overlooking the valley. There it was, the memorial garden. Small plaques, one for each retired K9 who'd lived out their years here. Carefully arranged, sun-warmed, none forgotten. Harper walked slowly, fingertips brushing each name. Coda, Jinx, Ranger, Bruno. And then, her breath caught. Atlas. The plaque was simple. Just his name, his service years, a small, etched paw print. Fresh wildflowers rested beside it. Someone remembered him. Harper knelt. Grass brushed her knees, the same spot where she'd once cried into his fur. She traced the carved letters, slow, gentle, as if pressing too hard might make them fade. She didn't cry. Not yet. She thought she would. She thought she'd fall apart instantly. But instead, she smiled. Soft, aching, warm. "Hey, Atlas," she whispered. "Long time." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small silver tag. The old one. The one she'd clipped to his collar 10 years ago. Family. The edges were worn, scratched, loved, warmed by memory. She placed it beside his plaque, pressing it gently into the earth. "You didn't just save my voice," she whispered. Her throat tightened. Her breath wavered. But she kept going. "You taught me how to use it." A warm breeze brushed her hair, like an answer. She wiped a tear she didn't know had escaped and laughed softly. "God, you'd hate all this sentimental stuff. You'd be rolling your eyes at me." Another breeze. Another soft warmth. Something intentional. Harper smiled. "I still think about that night," she whispered. "Not the bad parts. Not anymore. I think about how you ran into that room like you were made out of armor, and how you let me hold on to you like I was worth saving." She dug her fingers into the grass. "They call me the girl who helps silent kids speak." A tiny laugh escaped. Sometimes parents call me a miracle worker. She shook her head softly. But I'm just doing what you did. Being steady when the world feels too big. Another warm breeze. Another echo of presence. I hope you're resting, she whispered. I hope you know I'm okay now. Really okay. She sat back, looking over the golden valley. Wide, open, breathing. Birds circled overhead. The sun dipped low, painting the entire world in soft amber light. And Harper, for the first time in years, spoke without shaking. I miss you. No breakdown, no panic, just truth. Because finally, after 10 years, the truth didn't hurt. It healed. She placed her hand flat against the plaque. A goodbye, but also a beginning. She stood, wiped her jeans, took one last look at his name. Visit again soon, she whispered with a tiny smile. Yeah, of course. As she walked down the hill, the wind lifted again, swirling around her like a familiar presence guiding her forward. Maybe it was just the breeze. Or maybe, just maybe, some connections don't end. They just change shape.